Okay, in paper 2 section B, you're answering or attempting to answer what's known as the inform, explain, describe triplet. Now this is one of the areas where students do quite well because it's one of the easier ones to relate to. You're normally just asked to explain a process, to inform someone of something, or describe a scene or a scenario. I heavily recommend going for describe, and that's why I'm going to talk about that area. Now before you even get to the question and breaking down the question, there are a few things to remember, and I call them the sixes, just to try and remember the variation to try and get you high level writing. Now I'll mention this in this section, though it is applicable all the way throughout your writing. If you're doing the original writing coursework, the same applies, and also part of it definitely applies when you're writing the argue, persuade, advise triplet. So throughout all your triplets, try and bear these in mind. So the key ones is to use 6 varied pieces of punctuation. This doesn't mean you can use only 6 or more than 6, etc. You use 6. Now the simple ones, which kind of look you up to a C, are a comma, a full stop, and a question mark. Very simple, and they're kind of C-worthy language control. To get higher than a C, you'll be looking at using semicolon, colon, an exclamation mark, and a dash. So quickly, just to talk you through each one, if I'm using a semicolon, I'm either connecting long sentences, and by connecting I actually mean listing. So I might say, go all the way down to the end of the street, semicolon, walk past the pub with the blue door, semicolon, turn left at the letterbox, semicolon, move on towards the house, and then you'll see my car, etc. If I'm going to use a colon, I'm going to introduce something directly. So one of the key points of the lesson are, and then introduce them. If I'm going to use an exclamation mark, what I'm looking at doing is actually increasing the tone of that last word. Now this can be done for several reasons. It can be done in humour. Oh my, that was so funny. And the exclamation mark. I can put it in shock. He's coming straight at us. Again, exclamation mark. Or it could be in loss. I don't know what to do. Exclamation mark. Any of these is fine, and you just have to denote that you are changing the tone of the sentence to a higher tension in whichever form it is you are. So it's more funny, more stressful, more worrying, etc. When you're looking to use a dash, basically you're looking to change the tone briefly. And the way the best to explain this, if it's used properly, is you could say something like, Darren worked hard, dash, but will still fail. The dash works because you're saying something positive and dropping it to negative, or you could take it positive and become even more positive. So, Darren worked hard, but will pass anyway. And that's just a way of increasing it. So you can think about doing your clause, so whichever the words is, or sorry, whatever the words are, and then you give a dash to show you're going to change your tone, and then you've actually gone up in the second part. You can also use the dash or brackets to actually include a secondary piece of information. So that would be with regards to the light is bronze, I installed it myself. So the brackets there is used, or a dash could be used, to introduce a secondary piece of information that isn't as important but still noteworthy. This is really important because the punctuation can control the tone of the whole thing. If you look through any kind of prose or an article, you'll see that the punctuation dictates how your writing is read. So if you want to think of how important it is, think of a sheet with the correct stitching could be turned into some kind of shirt or top. Similarly, your punctuation will turn all your words into something very readable and enjoyable. Without it, you could have the best description in the world, but simply flounder and no one will be able to understand it because of your poor punctuation. And to prove this point, you can also change your sentences. On the website wcsenglish.com there is a example of a piece of work without punctuation. It's called Jack. Look for it and you'll see what the difference punctuation can make, and just try that exercise and see where you put the punctuation and what it can do. So that's the first piece, the 6 varied pieces of punctuation, and now we look on to the second piece for this triplet. You also want to talk about the 6 senses, or in your writing mention the 6 senses. Now of course most people say they're 5, and I just add a 6th just for a differentiation. So of course you have sight, touch, smell, taste, and then the one I add is actually feelings. So you can mention like internal feelings that your character is doing. So that's the 6 pieces of punctuation, the 6 senses. You need to remember at least 6 literary techniques, which are on almost every section of the website, such as alliteration, metaphor, etc, etc. There's no need for me to write them out again here because they are up on the website in many PowerPoints. And with this area in particular, I recommend doing describe. Now the reason I recommend doing describe is because you're inviting the reader into a world that you create. So if we look at the exam question here, we have 2 options that we have. Look at the photograph on the insert, imagine you are there, describe what you see and what your thoughts and feelings are as you look around. Now the key thing is to be a camera. You are not a scriptwriter, you are not a director. You literally record what's happening in that scene. Whatever you're recorded to ask for, don't try and make a story. That is not the purpose of this piece of writing. You are being asked first and foremost to show that you can describe something in detail. So if we take the insert mentioned earlier, looking over here, if this was the actual question, imagine you are there. So I might put my sensory writing. What can I hear? Well, I can hear the cackle of thunder. What can I see? I can see the bright lights. I can see the bright light of the lightning. I can also see the kind of murky horizon. I can see buildings in the distance, and I might be hoping that I get there. I might be able to smell the wet vegetation. I might be able to feel the touch. Maybe I'm barefooted and I'm running for safety. But again, I don't want to put why I'm running for safety because that would be part of a story. I might put I can also hear my heart beating as I run, and I can hear the heavy parts of my breath. When I'm using the literary techniques in these, I can say it was as bright as, and then go for that, or it smelled like, and then go for that. If I wanted to use, sorry, that would be if I was using a simile. If I wanted to use a alliteration, I could put the lingering lightning, or I could put something along the lines of the terrible tone of the thunder. Obviously terrible tone is the alliteration there, not thunder, because it has a different sound. But I break it down that way and use my punctuation all the way through just to pepper my work. Now as you're writing this, and same with the APA, make sure as you're going through, just to give yourself a little reminder, imagine if this is your page, or this is your page down here, before you even start writing, as you've actually written your plan, where you actually remind yourself of your senses and your punctuation and your actual scenario that you can do, just jot down a little, mark yourself alliteration or onomatopoeia or metaphor as you're going down the page, just so when you're writing and you get to that bit, you'll think, oh yeah, I'm going to add one of those in as well. I know it sounds a bit silly and you'll probably remember from the beginning, but just having it there to jog your memory, again with the punctuation or whatever sense it is, as you're going through, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, drop it in, oh yeah, drop it in, oh yeah, drop it in. Now if this clunks, it won't obviously be A-worthy, but if you do it even with just a semi-smoothness, just remind yourself and write it, you'll definitely get a high C or a low B just going through, as long as the rest of the story is. Remember, this is all about the detail. So when it comes to colours, don't say things just like it was blue. Even though it is descriptive, it's D-level description. Say it was the deepest azure blue. And there you've just added the adjectives to make it sound more realistic. You're just trying to be the camera, and you're trying to be like some 600 megapixel camera, if such a thing existed. If you just said blue, then you sound like a camera phone camera. So please try and be as descriptive as possible by using the adjectives and all the other pieces. And this should ensure that you get a high grade. Any part of it you want to describe, you can. So if there is someone coming along or someone behind you, that's fine, but just make sure you're not saying a lot about their story, why they're there. Just put in the information that you might want in terms of what a camera would see. The camera would not tell you the backstory, the camera would tell you what is in front of you. And just imagine you had a camera for each one of your senses. If you're asked to describe something that isn't there, it's also useful to just kind of sketch a little plan for yourself. So if you're asked for a bus stop, you might say, okay, there's a crowd of people there. You might say there is a car coming along from the left. You might also say that there is a traffic light which seems to be broken and everyone is waiting at the traffic light. You might hear beeping. You might smell someone on the bus's gum, etc. Just break it down into a little scene for yourself, and you'll find that encourages you to write more and more and more.